I think when you talk to people around Austin and you ask them what are the issues that affect your life, what are important, you hear two things. You hear affordability and you hear traffic. So let's start with affordability. How do you suppose we make the city more affordable, and what ideas do you have that that aren't already on the table?
Well, as you mentioned, affordability is a crisis situation in Austin, and it can be addressed in many ways. One of the things that I've been an absolute advocate for is the taxpayers. So as we have progressed through the last 2 years, I was one of the lead sponsors in making sure we continue our commitment to get to the 20% homestead exemption. And that becomes more important as property tax values increase, people's property tax bills increase also. So I think that's a place. I think the other place is with our senior population. So I've also been one of the lead sponsors in making sure that we have gone up with our senior tax exemption amount. It's a flat amount, and for the last 2 years we've been able to increase that, and that allows the seniors to be able to age in place, which I think is really important.
Do the people of Austin need to make a choice? Because people always want to keep Austin, Austin. Mm-hmm. But do they need to choose between that and keeping Austin affordable?
So I think everything is a balance. You know, what I've learned in the last 2 years when I'm making policy decisions that represent not only District 10 but also the city as a whole is policy decisions are often a balance. And so it's important to keep Austin's character as it is, but it's also important to maintain the affordability in whatever way we can so that people can stay here and people can afford to live here. We're seeing people having to move out of our community that have been here for a long time just because they cannot afford it anymore.
So how do we do that then? How do we find that balance?
Well, I think we have to control spending. So I think we cannot, as a city, be able to afford to spend on every need that we have. And we have incredible needs in this community, and we have really important needs in this community. But the citizens cannot always look to city government to pay with their tax dollars to cover all the needs that need to be addressed. So once again, we go back to balance. It's a balance of choosing what the city should be paying for with tax dollars and fees, and those are basically core services. And that's what I've tried to focus on, is moving us back to a conversation where we're spending on transportation needs, we're spending on public safety needs. I was endorsed by both the fire and police associations because of my advocacy for making sure that our tax dollars are spent on core public safety needs.
So, spending, to get the spending in check, what do you think? Give me an example of something that you think of that we're spending on right now that we don't need to be spending on.
Well, I don't know that we don't need to be spending on things. I think it comes down to choices.
Where would you make some cuts if you could?
So I would focus on core services. I think if we keep our conversation and our focus there, and once we have fully funded core services, then we can look at the accessory needs that need to be done. I would consider, of course, services, our public safety, making sure we have adequate fire stations and response times, public safety from the police department, making sure we have enough police officers on the street, certainly our infrastructure. You know, our traffic issues now are the result of us not spending as a community appropriately to build traffic infrastructure. Yes, we have grown, but the other piece of it is that we have not spent to manage that growth over many decades.
So what then would be an example of an accessory service or program that you think might be better handled by, say, the private sector as opposed to the city government?
You know, that's a good question, because I think what the city doesn't do a good job of really advocating for great public-private partnerships. You know, we have entities, for example, Mobile Loaves and Fishes in their Community First Village. They are doing an outstanding job of addressing homelessness in a way that's not using any public tax dollars but private donations. And we need to do more as a city to allow that to happen, and then to get out of the way of those entities that are really trying to support the needs in the community without using public tax dollars.
You mentioned transportation here in the city, an issue that has come up over and over again. It's been quiet recently, but something that's still on people's minds is this idea of the ride-sharing companies, Uber and Lyft. Where do you stand on having those companies operate in our city?
I think we need every resource available to offer that type of transportation. You know, as we talk about the safety factor of people having been drinking and not driving, the fact that they have those options is really important. As we see seniors that age and no longer want to drive at night, having those resources. And so I'm a proponent of having as many companies as possible in this town operating to provide those services.
Do you think we should roll back some of our requirements or regulations for those companies?
You know, I think we need to look at that in a really sensitive, positive way. The community voted that they really wanted the regulations in place as far as the background checks. We now have 8 companies that are operating within those regulations. We certainly would love Uber and Lyft to come back. We did not force them to leave. They left on their own will, and I would love for them to come back just because I think they would add another resource to the availability of people that are here that look to that service.
So when you were originally elected to your position now, you had the support of a number of former mayors and members of the city government. What would you say, though, to somebody who said, well, she's just connected to that old system and old people that we didn't like before? What is it you think that you can offer to the current system we have, the 10-1 system?
So I'm absolutely a proponent of the 10-1 system. I think it was long overdue. As we looked at the council representatives, previous councils, they were very focused on Central Austin. They live very close to Central Austin. They really didn't represent the geographic diversity of this community. I have tried really hard in the last 2 years to do what 10-1 was supposed to do, which was to be a voice for the entire community. So we have spent a lot of time, I've spent a lot of time actually out in all of District 10. We've had over 500 meetings with neighborhoods and community events. We've held 8 town hall meetings in the community. It's really important, I think, to make sure that we represent all of those voices. So if you look at my endorsements from the 5 former mayors, Austin's city council race is a nonpartisan race, and those 5 people represent different age groups. They also represent different political parties. And so I think it shows the diversity of my representation and my support District 10 wide.
When you and your fellow council members took your offices, you were in a sort of unique position because everybody was coming on this new system, and there was maybe some goodwill, you know, like, hey, let's all work together. Do you find that in the time since then, it's become a little more, I don't want to say partisan, but you know, there are factions here and factions there, and maybe some of that goodwill is not quite as strong as it was when you guys first took your jobs?
Well, I think, you know, as you mentioned before, Austin is an incredibly diverse community. District 10 is an incredibly diverse community. And so I think it's healthy to have different people on the council that represent those different voices and those different attitudes and the different desires. So I've been pleased with it. I mean, I think it is interesting to be able to work with different council members. As I've brought forth different resolutions, one of the issues that's very important to District 10 is wildfire risk. And so we brought forward a community wildfire plan that actually got the support of all council members. So in many cases, even though we have very diverse views and we represent different parts of the community, we do come together when we realize that there are things that affect a particular part of our community that needs support. So that's one of the things that I've enjoyed when I've been able to do something with the mayor on a particular project, or work with Ora Houston on a particular resolution, or Ann Kitchen, or Don Zimmerman, or Ellen Troxclair. We are more focused on the issues, not necessarily the political party, and I think that's really healthy.
All right. Councilmember Sherry Gallo, thank you so much. Thanks for your
You're
time.
welcome. Thank you for being here. Yes,
great.
yes,
Thank
enjoyed
you.
it.